Hello there, my sleepy knights. Tonight, we have a collection of Tavern Tales. The wind howls like a wounded beast, clawing at your furs with fingers of ice. You've misjudged the mountain pass between Whiterun and Windhelm, a mistake that might cost your life. The snow falls not in gentle flakes, but in sideways sheets that sting your exposed skin like needles, obscuring the path until each step becomes a gamble between solid ground and empty air. Your mount, a sturdy Skyrim stallion that has carried you through countless perils, finally refuses another step. The beast trembles behind you, steam rising from its heavying flanks to be snatched away by the gale. You dismount, legs numb and clumsy, and grip the reins to lead the animal forward. Time itself loses meaning in the white void. You might have been walking for minutes or hours when the wind shifts, parting the curtain of snow just long enough to reveal a faint golden glow in the distance. Hope surges through your frozen veins, lending strength to your laden limbs. Candlehearth Hall emerges from the storm like a mirage, its windows blazing with welcoming light. You stagger the final distance, practically falling through the door when it opens. The blast of heat hits you like a physical force, painful against your frozen skin. The tavern is unusually crowded, filled with travelers similarly caught by the blizzard's supernatural fury. The innkeeper, a weathered Nord woman with arms like tree trunks, takes one look at you and barks orders to her staff. Soon, you're seated by the massive hearth, a mug of spiced mead warming your hands, while a stable boy tends to your exhausted mount. Last room, she tells you gruffly, sliding a key across the counter when you finally approach. You're lucky. Another hour, and you'd be sleeping on the floor with that lot. She jerks her chin toward a group of merchants huddled near the door, their faces drawn with the resignation of those preparing for a night of discomfort. You retreat to your place by the fire, content to simply exist in warmth and safety, as feeling painfully returns to your extremities. The dragon bone amulet around your neck, a family heirloom of questionable origin, but undeniable craftsmanship, slips free of your tunic as you lean forward to warm your hands. Its polished surface catches the firelight, sending fragments of amber illumination dancing across your fingers. Well, that's a rare piece, comes a rumbling voice from your left. You find a massive Nord settling onto the bench beside you. One sleeve of his tunic hangs empty, pinned neatly at the shoulder. His beard is shot through with grey, but his eyes hold the sharp clarity of one who has seen much and forgotten little. Brune Wolf, he introduces himself, offering his single hand. His grip is firm. Don't often see dragon bone worked so fine. Mind if I ask where you came by it? Before you answer, he waves the question away. No matter. It's the wearing of it that interests me. They say dragon relics find their way to those who need their tales. He takes a long pull from his tankard. Would you like to hear a story, traveler? Might help pass the time until this cursed storm blows itself out. You nod, and the one-armed veteran begins his tale. And it went like this. In the hold of Falkreath, where the forest grows thick and ancient, there lived a woodcutter named Yormund. Now, this wasn't in recent times. This tale reaches back to when the great pines were saplings and the mountains a handspan shorter. Yormund had a wife with hair like autumn leaves and 3 children with her eyes green as spring grass. They were happy enough in summer and fall, but when winter came hard to the south, even the sturdiest heart might falter. Game grew scarce. The ground froze solid. And one particular winter, the worst in living memory, found Jormund watching his children grow thin and his wife's smile fade. When your children's bellies rumble loud enough to wake you in the night, a man considers paths he'd otherwise avoid. So, it was that Jormund found himself in the Forbidden Grove, a stand of ancient trees older than mankind's memory of Skyrim. The elders warned against cutting there. The Jarl had forbidden it. But Jormund's axe swung true, nonetheless. On his third swing, the blade struck something beneath the bark. Not wood. The strange black root that ran deep through the earth. And from this root spilled a substance like sap, but golden as morning sunlight. It smelled of summer and ripeness, of life itself in the dead winter. Jormund collected what he could in his water skin and returned home with wood enough for a modest fire. That night, as his family slept, he sat by the dying embers and found himself unable to rest. The golden sap seemed to pulse in its container, as if alive. A knock came at his door. 3 sharp raps seemed to echo through the quiet forest. When he opened it, there stood a woman of unearthly beauty, her skin pale as birch bark, her hair a cascade of leaves despite the season. "You have injured me," she said, her voice like wind through summer leaves. "And now you owe me a debt." Jormund, though simple, was no fool. He recognized one of the old powers when he saw it. A spirit of the ancient forest that predated even the elf's dominion. "I took only what my family needed to to survive, he protested. The forest spirit's eyes narrowed. All men justify their thefts with necessity. Yet, I am not unreasonable. I offer you a pact, mortal. Prosperity for your family. Food on your table. Gold in your purse. Health in your blood. In exchange, I claim something you value little now, but will miss greatly later. When your children cry from hunger, when your wife's ribs show through her nightdress, caution seems a luxury. Yormund agreed without asking what price would eventually come due. The spirit smiled then, not unkindly, but with the patience of a being who measures time in centuries rather than moments. The pact is sealed, she said, and was gone. From that day, Yormund's fortunes changed as suddenly as the weather in reach. Game practically walked into his traps. His woodcraft fetched higher prices at market. His children grew plump and healthy, while neighbors' babes sickened with winter coughs. Years passed. The terrible winter became a story to frighten children, then a distant memory, then merely a line in the Jarl's record books. Yormund's daughters grew tall and strong. His son broad-shouldered and clever. The family prospered. And if Yormund sometimes woke in the night, cold with unnamed dread, he pushed the feeling aside in the bright certainty of daylight. Until his eldest daughter's wedding day. She was resplendent in white, her mother's green eyes bright with happiness as she took her vows in the temple of Mara. When the time came to seal the union with a drop of blood from each partner, an old Nord tradition, she pricked her finger with the ceremonial dagger. What flowed from the wound was not blood, but golden sap, identical to what Yormund had collected in the Forbidden Grove years before. In that moment, Jormund understood the true price of his bargain. The forest spirit had claimed his bloodline. His children and their descendants would gradually transform, becoming one with the ancient grove he had violated. In his desperation to save them from winter's hunger, he had condemned them to eventually cease being human at all. That night, leaving his wife sleeping, Jormund journeyed to the ancient tree known as Eldergleam. It was said this tree, oldest in all Skyrim, remembered the time before men walked the northern lands. If any could advise him, it would be this living monument to ages past. And so he traveled for 13 days, eating little, sleeping less. When he finally stood before the massive trunk of the Eldergleam, words failed him. But the ancient tree needed no speech to understand his purpose. A single branch lowered, touching his forehead, and in an instant, Jormund saw his choice with perfect clarity. He could save either his children or his grandchildren, but not both. The transformation had already begun in his offspring. It could only be transferred, not erased. Without hesitation, Jormund chose to save the unborn generations. He gathered sap from each of his 3 children as they slept, brewed it with ingredients from the Eldergleam, and drank the potion himself. A curse or blessing, depending on one's view, transferred to him completely. Within a month, his feet had taken root. By midwinter, his arms had become branches, his skin rough bark. By spring, only his face remained human, set like a carving in the trunk of a unique tree that now stood at Falkreath's center. They say that tree still stands today, though few connect it to the old tale of Jormund the woodcutter. Once a year, it's said it bears a single fruit that can cure any disease, no matter how grave. Local tradition holds that those healed must plant a new tree somewhere in thanks. For what is taken must always be returned in kind. Brune wolf, full silent, draining the last of his mead. You notice the tavern has grown quieter now. Several nearby patrons having abandoned their own conversations to listen to the story. A good tale deserves good mead, says a silky voice from behind you. A Dunmer woman approaches, her crimson eyes reflecting the firelight. Arania, she introduces herself, sliding onto the bench across from you. I couldn't help but notice your amulet. The carvings. Yes. They remind me of another story. If you'd care to hear it. And the story went like this. During the Dragon War, when men first rebelled against their scaled overlords, twin brothers served among the elite warriors of the dragon cult. Heddick and Fioric, identical in face and form, but increasingly different in spirit as the war progressed. Heddick was the first to notice the corruption among the priests, how they twisted the dragon's demands to serve their own ambition. He witnessed sacrifices that benefited no one but the priest's lust for power. Saw how they hoarded knowledge that might have spared innocence. Being honorable, if perhaps naive, he confronted the high priest directly. That night, he told Fioric of his plan to defect, to carry what he knew to the growing rebellion of men. Come with me, brother, he urged. We've served falsehood long enough. But Fioric had risen higher in the cult's ranks than his twin. He enjoyed privileges Heddick had never sought. Chose sacrifices, secret knowledge, the fear in petitioners' eyes when he conducted rituals. When Heddick slept, Fioric crept from their shared quarters to the high priest's chambers. And by dawn, Heddick was in chains. Now, it would have been simpler to execute the betrayer. A sword across the throat, a dagger between the ribs. Clean and final. But the dragon priests were not known for such mercies. Instead, they performed a forbidden ritual, one that bound the twin souls together across the boundary of life and death. They entombed Heddick alive in a sealed chamber with no door. Only a small opening through which air could pass, enough to sustain life, but not enough for hope of escape. Fioric they kept as their champion, knowing that what one brother felt, the other would experience in kind. When Fioric was wounded in battle, Heddick writhed in agony within his lightless prison. When Heddick struggled against his bonds in desperation, Fioric would suddenly find himself weakened at crucial moments. Each brother became the other's torture, though only one understood why. Years passed by. The rebellion succeeded. The dragons fell. And Fioric, having survived the conflict, was entombed with honors when his time came. Interred in the same barrow where his brothers still lived in darkness, separated only by a wall of stone. Centuries passed. Their shared consciousness existed in a twilight state, neither truly alive nor properly dead. And their hatred festered in that in-between space, transforming both into a unique form of Draugr, undead that retained the ability to feel emotions, to hunger for more than mere flesh. Then, during the Third Era, Red Mountain erupted with such violence that tremors were felt across Skyrim. The ancient barrow shook, and the wall between the brothers cracked. For 13 days, they battled within the tomb, perfectly matched, knowing each other's every move before it was made. No victory was possible. Finally exhausted, they collapsed on opposite sides of the ruined wall, cursed to this half-life together, Firelight said at last. Neither can destroy the other without destroying himself. Heddick, who had years of solitude to consider their situation, nodded. Then let us forge purpose from our curse. We will be judges of those who enter our tomb. And so, they made their pact. If an intruder resembled Firelight in temperament, the betrayer, the ambitious one, Heddick would destroy them. If they resembled Heddick, the betrayed, the righteous one, Firelight would attack. But should siblings enter their domain together, they would be tested rather than simply attacked. The brothers would present them with dilemmas to test their loyalty to each other. Most failed these tests. When offered individual escape at the cost of the other's entombment, most chose self-preservation. These the brothers destroyed without mercy. Those rare few who refused to betray each other, even at great personal cost, these the brothers allowed to leave, carrying with them a single treasure from the tomb. Such blessed siblings, it said, never faced familial betrayal for the rest of their days. The brothers' blessing ensured it. Some scholars believe the barrow still exists, somewhere in the mountains, near Welltown, though its precise location has been lost to time. Others insist the tale is merely allegory, a warning against betraying bloodlines. But those who study the oldest Droger speak of unusual carvings showing twin figures bound by golden chains. And sometimes, in the deepest tombs, adventurers report hearing two voices speaking as one, testing them with questions no stranger should know to ask. Arania finishes her tale, and you notice her eyes still fixed on your amulet, studying the worn carvings with scholarly interest. The tavern has grown quieter still, as more patrons have turned to listen. Outside, the wind's howl seems to have diminished slightly, though the snow still falls thick beyond the windows. A worthy tale, comes a lilting voice. A Khajiit approaches your small gathering, his striped fur visible beneath a dusting of melting snow. He must have just entered the tavern. But this one thinks a third voice should complete the evening, yes? 3 is a powerful number in all magics. The Khajiit introduces himself as Carjo, the caravan guard. He gestures to your amulet. The dragon bone speaks to this one's story as well. If you would hear it, and the tale went like this. In the Second Era, a young, stable hand named Alessan worked at the Solitude stables. He was unremarkable in most ways, neither tall nor short, strong nor weak. But he possessed one gift that set him apart. An uncanny bond with horses. The most ill-tempered stallion would grow calm under his touch. The most skittish mare would allow him to handle her foal. This talent did not go unnoticed, and soon nobles specifically requested that Alessan care for their prized mounts when the business brought them to Solitude. One winter night, as Halloween's moon hid its face completely from Niern, Alessan completed his evening chores. The stable was full, every stall occupied by fine horses belonging to the Jarls and Thanes gathering for a moot. As he prepared to seek his own bed in the loft above, he noticed a peculiar silence. The horses, normally nickering softly as they settled in for the night, stood absolutely still. Their ears pricked forward toward the stable doors. Curious, Alessan opened the heavy wooden door just a crack and froze in wonder. Standing in the snowy courtyard was a horse unlike any he had ever seen. Black as a starless night, with a mane that seemed to contain pinpricks of light, like distant stars. Steam rose from its flanks, though there was no evidence it had been ridden hard. "Whose mount are you?" Alessan whispered, stepping forward. His hand extended, palm flat in the way he approached all unfamiliar horses. The midnight mare regarded him with eyes that reflected no light. To his astonishment, a voice spoke directly into his mind. I belong to no mortal man yet. Alasan should have been afraid. Any sensible Nord would have reached for amulets of warding, or fled to find a priest of Stendar. But this stable boy had spent his life surrounded by horses, finding more comfort in their company than that of men. Even a horse that spoke with thoughts didn't frighten him as perhaps it should. What do you want of me? He asked simply. Catch me, the mayor replied, and I will make you a horseman whose name echoes through the ages. Before he could respond, she wheeled and galloped away, her hoofs leaving no prints in the fresh snow. The next night she returned, and the next. And each time she presented him with different tests, catching her at full gallop, riding her bareback over treacherous terrain, guiding her through obstacle courses. What Alasan couldn't know was that the mare was Nightmare, a creation of the Daedric prince Vermina, sent to find a suitable champion in the mortal realm. As Alasan passed each test, he began experiencing strange dreams. He would see disasters before they struck. A fire in the merchant quarter, collapsing mine shaft, a child falling through river ice. Each morning after such a dream, he contrived to be near the location from each vision. Each time, he managed to prevent tragedy, or at least mitigate it. People began to notice the lucky stable boy they called him at first. Then, the names of Blessed and Seer followed him through Solitude's streets. The High King himself took notice when Alasan's warning prevented an assassination attempt. The stable boy was raised to the position of royal stablemaster, a remarkable ascension for one so young and common born. All the while, the Midnight Mare continued her nightly visits, visible only to Alasan. "You're nearly ready," she told him, after he had thwarted the assassins. "One final test remains." On midwinter's night, with twin moons hidden and the sky black as ink, she appeared at his window in the royal stables. "Tonight, you must ride me across the sea to the island where your true destiny awaits." Alasan followed without question, mounting the Midnight Mare with the easy grace of one born to the saddle. To his amazement, she galloped across the surface of the cold sea as if it were solid ground. Her starry mane leaving a trail of light across the black waters. They came to a small, fog-shrouded island where stood an ancient Nordic ruin, half reclaimed by earth and vine. Inside, Alasan discovered chamber after chamber filled with sarcophagi, each bearing the likeness of a man or woman with closed eyes and peaceful expressions. "My previous champions," Nightmare explained, her thought voice echoing. "Each served for Mina for exactly 10 years. Their dreams shaped mortal events, steering history along courses that pleased my mistress. Alasan studied the stone faces, dozens of them, from every race of Tamriel. With sudden clarity, he understood the trap he had nearly stumbled into. And after 10 years, their bodies rest here. Their souls serve in another realm, came the simple reply. A common stable boy he might have been, but Alasan had spent his life reading horses. Creatures who cannot lie with words but speak volumes with subtle movements. He had learned to sense intent behind action. And now, facing the Daedric servant, he recognized something unexpected. Loneliness. "You've been collecting champions since time immemorial," he said. "But you yourself remain apart. The messenger, never the message. The bearer, never the gift. The midnight mare's form shimmered slightly. Surprise evident even in her otherworldly countenance. I propose a different bargain, Alisan continued. Not as Fermina's champion who manipulates dreams, but as caretaker of the nightmares themselves. And so, Alisan became the first nightmare shepherd, able to enter dreams and guide or redirect nightmares away from the innocent. His descendants inherited this ability through their bond with horses. True members of his bloodline can still be identified by their uncanny skill with troubled mounts. In modern Skyrim, it is said that strange black horses sometimes appear to lost travelers during moonless nights, guiding them to safety to the nearest settlement. These steeds vanish with the dawn, leaving only a single black hair that shimmers with starlight. When held to the moon, Carjo finishes his tale, the slight bow of his furred head. The howling of the storm has diminished to a gentle whisper against the shadows. Weariness tugs at your limbs. The combination of your perilous journey, warm mead, and the hypnotic quality of the tales conspiring to draw you towards sleep. You bid goodnight to the storytellers, making your way to your rented room. Sleep comes swiftly, deep, and dreamful. The morning arrives with startling clarity. The storm has passed completely, leaving a landscape transformed into glittering white sculpture beneath a sky of flawless blue. As you prepare to resume your journey, you inquire after your 3 companions from the previous night. The innkeeper furrows her brow. I don't recall any one-armed Nord or Dunmer woman, she says. Had a few Khajiit, but they left before the storm hit. She studies your face. Too much mead, maybe. That hearth can put strange notions in a traveler's head when the wind howls. You might have dismissed the entire evening as exhaustion-induced fantasy, except for when you discover in your pack as you ready your horse. 3 small tokens lie nestled among your provisions. A perfect leaf preserved in amber, a matched pair of ancient Nordic coins, and a single black horsehair that seems to shimmer even in direct sunlight. As you continue your journey down the mountain pass toward Windhelm, you begin to notice subtle changes in how the world responds to you. A pair of wolves that emerge from the tree line simply watch you pass rather than attacking. At a crossroads, you instinctively choose the left fork without consulting your map, somehow certain it's the swifter route. And when night falls and you make camp, your dreams are unusually vivid, yet leave you more rested than any sleep in recent memory. Perhaps the tales carried more truth than fiction. Perhaps the dragonbone amulet that has hung around your neck since childhood truly does attract stories and their tellers that you need to hear. Or perhaps in Skyrim, where the boundary between myth and reality has always been thin, the stories we hear have ways of writing themselves into our lives, whether we believe them or not. You touch the amulet briefly, feeling its warmth against your fingers, and continue down the path that winds ever eastward through the ancient, snow-laden pines. The road to Riften has proved more treacherous than your map suggested. What should have been a more straightforward journey through the southern reaches of Eastmarch has become a test of endurance against howling winds and driving sleet. Your horse's breath form clouds of vapor that are snatched away by the gale before they can properly form, and ice crystals sting your exposed skin like tiny needles. The storm struck without warning as you crested a ridge overlooking the dark Water River Valley. One moment, you were riding under an overcast but manageable sky. The next, you were engulfed in a maelstrom of snow and wind that reduced visibility to mere arm's length. Your mount, a reliable mare that has carried you safely through countless adventures, finally bogs at continuing forward into the white void. But through the curtain of snow, a warm glow beckons from what appears to be a roadside inn nestled against a cluster of pine trees. The sleeping giant inn emerges from the storm like a beacon of hope, its windows glowing with welcoming firelight. You guide your exhausted horse toward the stable, where a bundled figure emerges to take your reins with practiced efficiency. Inside, the inn radiates warmth, the comforting sounds of conversation and clinking tankards. The common room is crowded with fellow travelers, all apparently caught by the same unexpected storm. The innkeeper, a stout imperial man with graying temples, takes one look at your ice-crusted cloak and immediately gestures towards the massive stone hearth. Last room upstairs, he tells you, after you've thawed sufficiently to approach the counter. Storm like this, we're doing our best to accommodate everyone. Hot meal, warm meat will cost extra, but I'm guessing you won't mind. You settle near the fire, grateful for the warmth seeping back into your bones. The dragonbone amulet you've worn since childhood somehow worked its way outside your tunic during the ride, and its carved surface catches the firelight, sending patterns of shadow and light dancing across your hands. It's then that you notice the attention of 3 very different individuals seated nearby. The first to approach is a grizzled Nord veteran, his weathered face bearing the scars of old battles. His left eye is clouded with blindness, but his right fixes on your amulet with keen interest. Dag, he introduces himself simply, settling onto the bench beside you with the careful movements of one whose joints have seen better days. That's fine work around your neck. Dragonbone, if I may add. Reminds me of a tale from the olds. Back when the Dragon War still cast its shadow. Might help pass the time while this cursed storm howls. You nod your acceptance, and the veteran's voice takes on the cadence of one who has told this story many times before. The tale goes like this. In the hold of Eastmarch, where the mountains breathe fire through cracks in the stone, there once ruled a jarl named Stonehand Valerius. This was during the Dragon War, mind you, a time when ambition and desperation walked hand in hand. Men did things that would make Molag Bal himself take notice. Valerius was not content with merely surviving the chaos of those days. While other jarls fortified their holds and prayed to the gods for deliverance, he sought power that would make him unassailable. A legacy carved in stone and sealed in fire. His hold sat atop a network of geothermal vents, and he became obsessed with the idea of harnessing the earth's own rage for his purposes. In the depths of his keep's library, Valerius discovered texts that should have remained buried. Fragments of Daedric knowledge, perhaps, or the forgotten wisdom of the Falmer before their corruption. These writings spoke of rituals to bind the primal forces that flowed beneath Nirn, to corrupt and dominate the very bones of the earth. Any wise man would have burned such texts. Valerius studied them with the fervor of the damned. So, on the night of a particularly violent eruption from a nearby volcanic vent, an omen that should have given him pause, Jarl performed the ritual described in these accursed pages. But where the text spoke of respectful binding, Valerius chose domination. Where they counseled patience, he demanded immediate power. His arrogance was absolute, his hubris complete. The ritual succeeded, after a fashion. But in corrupting the earth spirits for his own ends, Valerius caught the attention of something far older and more terrible than he could have imagined. Some say it was an unnamed aspect of Molag Bal, drawn by his lust for domination. Others whisper of Boethia, attracted to such treacherous ambition. The truth matters less than consequence. The entity, whatever it was, placed a curse upon Valerius's bloodline. His wife, already heavy with child, gave birth not to the heir he had hoped for, but to something that would haunt his dreams until his dying day. They called it the Chittering Scourge. Imagine, if you will, something that was once meant to be human, twisted into a form that borrowed from the deepest horrors of the earth. Its skin resembled cool, volcanic rock, cracked and fissured, the faint glow emanating from within as if molten blood flowed through its veins. Its limbs stretch unnaturally long, ending in claws, like the mandibles of the giant charas that infest the deepest caves. Its head, by the gods, its head bore compound eyes that reflected light like black mirrors, mandibles that clicked and jittered in a rhythm that seemed to echo the shifting of tectonic plates. The creature moved with a sort of skittering gait that sent shivers down the spine of the bravest warrior. Its voice was the sound of grinding stone, of pressure building in deep places where rational thought fears to tread. It hungered constantly, not just for food, but for the terror it could inspire, the pain it could inflict. A wiser man might have ended its existence immediately. A more merciful man might have found some way to break the curse Valeria's stone hand was neither wise nor merciful. He saw in this monstrosity a twisted reflection of his own ambitions. A weapon that could strike fear into the hearts of his enemies. A secret that could be leveraged for power. So, he ordered the construction of a vast labyrinth beneath his keep, built into the natural network of geothermal caverns that honeycombed the mountain. But this was no simple maze. It was a scalding hell of steam vents, sulphurous fumes, treacherous drops and passages that led nowhere. The builders were enslaved goblins, prisoners of war, most of whom perished in the toxic atmosphere before the work was complete. Into these sunless depths, Valerius confined his monstrous offspring. At first he fed it livestock, cattle and sheep that disappeared into the labyrinth's maw, never to be seen again. But as his paranoia grew and his grip on sanity loosened, the Jarl's definition of acceptable fodder expanded. Condemned criminals were the first to be lost in accidents near the geothermal works. Then, political rivals who asked too many questions. Eventually, even visiting dignitaries who had the misfortune to discover hints of the Jarl's dark secret found themselves taking fatal missteps near unstable ground, their screams echoing briefly through stone passages before being swallowed by the chittering that rose from below. The people of the hold lived in constant terror, though few understood the true source of their fear. The ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with malevolent life. Strange sounds drifted upwards. Not just the creature's chittering, but the echo of its movements through passages carved from living rock. Valerius himself began to change. The constant proximity to his cursed creation, the weight of maintaining such a terrible secret, and perhaps the lingering effects of his forbidden ritual, all took their toll. His hair went white within a year. His eyes developed a nervous tic that made him appear constantly startled. He spoke to himself in the old tongue, uttering phrases from the ritual that had damned him. The end came, as such things always do, when the secret grew too large to contain. Whether he was overthrown by his desperate subjects, consumed by his own madness, or killed by the very creature he had thought to control, the histories disagree. What they agree upon is that Jarl Valerius Stonehand's line ended with him, and his hold was abandoned within a generation. But the sunless depths remain. Subsequent rulers tried to seal the labyrinth, but the geothermal activity of the region makes any permanent closure impossible. Steam still rises from cracks in the earth where the old keep once stood, Locals report strange lights moving through the ruins on moonless nights, and the occasional tremor that seems to emanate not from shifting earth, but from something vast moving through the chambers below. Some say the chittering scourge still dwells in those depths, grown larger and more terrible over the centuries of isolation. Others claim it has spawned, creating a brood of horrors that tunnel through the mountain's roots. The brave or foolish occasionally attempt to explore the ruins, seeking treasure from the Jarl's abandoned vaults. Few return, and those who do speak of passages that seem to rearrange themselves, of chittering that follows them through the darkness, and of the overwhelming sense that something ancient and hungry watches from the deepest shadows. This tale serves as a warning, young traveler, about the price of unchecked ambition, about the dangers of seeking power without wisdom, and about the fact that some secrets are too terrible to keep, yet too dangerous to reveal. In East March, when the ground trembles, strange sounds rise from the earth. People still whisper the name of Illyria Stonehand. And remember that the foundations of power, no matter how strong they seem, can be corrupted from within. As Dag finishes his grim tale, another voice cuts through the tavern's ambient noise. A Breton woman approaches, her robes marking her as a scholar of some sort. Her eyes sharp with intelligence, though there's a haunted quality to them that speaks of knowledge hard won. Firelight, she introduces herself, sliding gracefully onto the bench across from you. I couldn't help but notice your reaction to that tale. The dragon bone you wear. It reminds me of artifacts I once studied, back when I was fool enough to believe that all knowledge was worth pursuing. Perhaps you'd care to hear of another who sought power beyond mortal ken. Without waiting for your explicit consent, she begins her story, her voice carrying the measured cadence of academic training. In the time before Tiber Septim united the Empire, when the kingdoms of High Rock still warred among themselves, and the ancient ways held more sway than they do today, there lived a scholar named Lyra Vane. She was brilliant, perhaps too brilliant for her own good, and possessed of a curiosity that bordered on obsession. Lyra was not content with the written histories that filled the libraries of Wayrest and Daggerfall. She saw gaps in knowledge, the inconsistencies between accounts, the way political concerns colored every chronicle. What she wanted was truth, pure, unfiltered truth about the deep history of Nirn, untainted by mortal interpretation or bias. Her research led her to fragments of ancient Al-Dimri meditation techniques, scraps of Psychic philosophy, and even strangers' texts that spoke of Nadic shamanistic practices before the arrival of the Nords. From these disparate sources, she pieced together references to something called the Silent Path, a theoretical state of consciousness that would allow direct communion with the deepest memories of Nirn itself. For most scholars, such references would remain merely theoretical, interesting philosophical concepts with no practical application. But Lyra was not most scholars. She spent years developing what she believed to be the practical framework for achieving this transcendent state, gathering rare, ethereal crystals, calculating precise astronomical alignments, and searching for a location the barriers between Mundus and the deeper realms were thin enough to breach. She found such a place in the Dru Adag Mountains, an ancient menhir circle that predated human settlement in the region. The stones themselves seemed to hum with barely contained energy, and our instruments detected ley line convergences of extraordinary power. It was perfect for her purposes, and perfectly dangerous. On the night of a rare celestial alignment, when Masser and Secunda stood in precise conjunction with specific constellations, Lyra performed her ritual. The ethereal crystals blazed with captured starlight. The menhirs resonated with harmonic frequencies that seemed to make the air itself vibrate, and reality shifted. Her consciousness didn't travel to oblivion or Aetherius as she had expected. Instead, it sank deeper into the very essence of Nirn, into the planetary consciousness that had existed since the forming of the world. She achieved what she has sought: direct access to the planet's memory, unfiltered by mortal perception. What she experienced defies easy description. Imagine witnessing the convention of the Etada, seeing the earthbones establish the laws of reality, watching the slow dance of continents as they shifted over geological ages. She saw the rise and fall of civilizations that left no traces in any written history, witnessed the birth of mountain ranges and the carving of ocean basins, experienced the raw creative force that shaped the world from primordial chaos. To her perception, this revelation lasted only days, perhaps a week of intense, overwhelming experience. She felt herself absorbing knowledge that no mortal mind was meant to hold. The wonder of it, the pure joy of finally touching absolute truth, sustained her through the ordeal. When the celestial alignment broke and her consciousness snapped back to her physical form, Lyra found herself lying on cold stone, the center of the circle. But something was wrong. The stones looked different, more weathered, more worn. The paths leading to the circle were overgrown with vegetation she didn't recognize. It took her 3 days of confused wandering to reach the nearest settlement. And when she did, nothing was as she remembered. The small village she had passed through on her way to the ritual site had grown into a thriving town. The local dialect had shifted enough to make communication difficult. The very geography seemed subtly altered, as if the landscape itself had changed. Seeking answers, she made her way to the nearest major city, hoping to consult scholars. Scholars who might explain what had happened to her. What she discovered there shattered her sanity more completely than any Daedric curse could have imagined. Her days of communion with the silent path had equated to centuries in the normal flow of time. Everyone she had ever known was long dead. The political landscape had been redrawn multiple times, languages had evolved, technologies had advanced. She was a relic from an age that existed now only in historical texts. Texts that didn't even mention her name. But worse than the temporal displacement was the burden of the knowledge she had gained. The memories of Nirn's deep history that she had so desperately sought now played constantly in her mind. An endless stream of geological ages, the rise and fall of species, of the slow dance of creation and destruction that operates on scales incomprehensible to mortal perception. She had wanted truth, and she had perceived it in its purest form. But truth, she discovered, is not always a blessing. Human mind is not designed to hold the memories of eons. The sheer scale of what she had witnessed, the knowledge that individual lines, even entire civilizations, are but momentary flickers in the grand sweep of cosmic time, drove her inexorably toward madness. Lyra became a wanderer, known to the locals as the Echo Drinker or the Mad Sage of the Peaks. She was seen trudging through mountain passes, clad in rags, uttering to herself about cities that had fallen before the first humans walked the earth, about stars that had sung the world into being, about the slow pulse of geological time that beat beneath every footstep. It is said that sometimes she would stop, trace intricate patterns in the dirt with a stick. Maps of continental drift spanning millions of years, or diagrams of celestial mechanics that wouldn't be understood by conventional astronomy for generations to come. Those brave enough to approach her reported that she spoke in languages that predated human speech, and that her eyes held a depth of knowledge that was beyond terrifying to behold. Eventually, she disappeared entirely. Some say she found her way back to the circle. and managed to return to the silent path permanently, her consciousness dissolving into the planetary memory she had sought to access. Others believe she simply wandered into the wilderness and perished, her mind finally unable to bear the weight of cosmic truth. But her story became a cautionary tale among scholars and mystics, a reminder that some knowledge comes at too high a price, that the deepest truths of the universe are guarded not by demons or dragons, but by their very immensity. Silent path still exists, they say, for those brave or foolish enough to seek it. But those who study such things now understand that some doors once opened can never be closed, and some burdens once accepted can never be set down. This tale serves as a warning about the seductive danger of seeking knowledge without wisdom, about the importance of understanding that mortal minds have limits that should be casually transgressed, and about the fact that sometimes the greatest discoveries carry the greatest curses. As Liralai concludes her tale, the conversation in the tavern has grown quieter, with other patrons drawn into the atmosphere of the stories being told. It's then that a third voice joins the gathering, a young woman whose traditional furs mark her as being far from the north. The air grows heavy here. Such tales of power misused and prices paid, she says, settling beside the fire with fluid grace of one born to harsh climates. Her gaze grows distant as she stares into the flame. My people too have stories whispered by the northern winds, of warnings unheeded, and sorrows that echo across the ages. She looks up, meeting your eyes directly. Anyu is my name. If you would hear it, I carry a tale that speaks to the same truths these others have shared. At your nod, she begins, her voice carrying the rhythm of ancient oral traditions. In the furthest reaches of the northern Pale, where winter never truly releases its grip, and the aurora dances nightly across star-filled skies, there lies a valley known as Hoarfrost Hollow. It is a place of perpetual ice and silence, where the wind carries echoes that seem to speak of sorrows older than human memory. Long ago, this valley was home to a small clan of Nord folk who possessed a gift both wondrous and rare. 3 siblings, Astrid, Solveig, and their brother Gunnar, were born with voices that could sing to the ice itself. This was not mere tonal architecture, as practiced in the great cities, but something deeper and more primal. connection to fundamental forces that flowed in their blood like ancestral birthright. When they sang together, their harmonized voices could create patterns of frost so intricate they seemed like frozen music. They could predict avalanches by listening to the subtle harmonics of shifting snow. Calm, aggressive ice wraiths with lullabies their grandmother had taught them, and even influenced the local weather to protect their clan from the worst of winter's fury. The people of Hoarfrost Hollow revered the three siblings as blessed by Kaine herself. Their gift helped the clan survive in a land that challenged even the hardiest Nord constitution. Their father, a widowed hunter named Bjorn, protected them fiercely, understanding that their abilities made them both valuable and vulnerable. But in the deepest part of the hollow were ancient ice-formed caves that led to the mountain's heart, dwelt something that viewed their gift with jealous eyes. A hag-raven matriarch, or perhaps a coven of reach-folk witches who had discovered forbidden ice magics, had made the deepest caves their domain. These practitioners of dark arts had spent decades trying to master the forces and came so naturally to the three children, and their failure bred a resentment that curdled into pure malice. The conflict began over territory. The Ice Singer's clan had traditionally harvested ice from certain pure springs for their rituals and practical needs. But the Hagraven's presence had begun to corrupt these sources, turning crystal clear ice black with taint, and filling the air around them with the stench of dark magic. When Bjorn confronted the Hagraven about this encroachment, she saw an opportunity for revenge against those natural gifts that had mocked her crude sorcery for so long. If she could not possess their power, she would ensure that no one else could benefit from it either. And so, on the night of the winter solstice, when the aurora blazed with unusual intensity, the ice sang with harmonics that could be felt as much as heard. Hagraven performed a ritual of unprecedented cruelty. Using personal items stolen from the siblings, a carved bone comb that belonged to Astrid, a pair of ice-walking boots that Solveig had worn since childhood, and a hunting knife that had been their father's gift to Gunnar, she wove a curse that would transform their greatest strength into their eternal torment. The ritual required the heart of an ancient frost giant, herbs that grew only in soil watered by tears of despair, and the sacrifice of a creature that had never known warmth. As the magical energies reached their peak, Hagraven spoke words of binding that echoed through the mountain's bones, sealing the fate of the three siblings with malicious precision. Now, the Ice Singers did not die. That would have been a mercy Hagraven was not inclined to grant. Instead, their physical forms dissolved like mist, their spirits torn apart and rebound as disembodied entities forever tied to Hoarfrost Hollow. They became something between ghosts and elementals, consciousness aware but unable to interact with the world except through their voices. They are the Wailing Choir now, 3 distinct presences that manifest only as haunting vocalizations carried on the bitter wind. Where their sorrow is greatest, unnatural phenomena occur, sudden blizzards that spring from clear skies, ice sculptures that form spontaneously and seem to depict figures in poses of eternal anguish, and temperatures that plummet far below what even that harsh climate normally produces. Their song is beautiful and terrible, a harmony of loss and longing that speaks to the deepest places of the human heart. But it is also dangerous. Those who listen too long find themselves drawn toward despair. The music enters their minds and will not leave, playing endlessly until madness becomes preferable to consciousness. The curse bound them to the confines of Hoarfrost Hollow with chains stronger than any mortal metal. They cannot leave, cannot find peace, cannot even properly die. Hagraven crafted the terms of their imprisonment, deliberate cruelty. They would remain until the mountain's heart thaws by a sunless fire, or until the silent stars weep tears of warmth on the frozen tears of the hollow. Conditions designed to be impossible to fulfill. Their father Bjorn, discovering his children transformed into this eternal punishment, was driven mad by grief and rage. He spent the remaining years of his life searching every ice cave and frozen crevice in the hollow, following their voices through passages that led nowhere, calling their names until his throat bled and his voice failed. They could hear him, could sing to him, but could never answer in words or show themselves in forms he could embrace. Eventually, the cold and madness claimed him, and his body was found frozen at the base of an ice waterfall. His face turned upward, as if he had been listening to music only he could hear. The hollow became a place of dread and desolation. Hagraven Coven drew power from the amplified despair, using the siblings' anguish to fuel their dark magics. The constant presence of supernatural sorrow affected the local ecosystem. Wildlife fled the area. Normal weather patterns became chaotic, and the very ice seemed to carry an aura of melancholy, could be felt by anyone who entered the valley. Travelers who stumble into Hoarfrost Hollow report hearing the most beautiful and heartbreaking music they have ever experienced. Those who linger too long find themselves unable to leave. The Wailing Choir's song calls to the loneliness and loss that exists in every heart, drawing listeners deeper into the valley until they become lost in blizzards that seem to exist solely to hide their fate. Some say the curse can still be broken, that the cryptic conditions speak of a shout yet to be learned, or a magical fire that burns without light. Occasionally, someone brave or desperate enough ventures into the hollow, seeking either to free the tormented siblings or to gain some benefit from their supernatural state. The wailing choir remains, their voices rising with every storm that sweeps across the northern reaches. A reminder that some wrongs create echoes that reverberate across the centuries, and that the cruelest prisons are often built not from stone and iron, but from the deliberate corruption of love itself. As Anu finishes her haunting tale, the storm outside begins to subside. The howling wind that trapped you all here has diminished to a whisper. Through the windows, you can see the first pale rays of dawn breaking through the dispersing clouds. The three storytellers, scarred veteran, the haunted scholar, the young woman from the north, sit in comfortable silence for a moment, each seemingly lost in their own thoughts. Around the tavern, other guests are beginning to stir, preparing to resume journeys interrupted by the storm. You retire to your room for a few hours of sleep, your dreams filled with chittering horrors in volcanic depths, scholars lost in cosmic time, and voices singing eternal sorrow across frozen wastelands. When you wake and prepare to continue your journey to Riften, you seek out your three companions to offer thanks for the tales that helped pass the storm-bound hours. But the innkeeper looks puzzled when you describe them. "Can't say I recall anyone matching those descriptions," he says, scratching his greying head. "Had plenty of folks sheltering from the storm, but those three together? Hard to keep track in weather like that." You might have dismissed the entire evening as an exhaustion-induced dream were it not for the three items you discover carefully placed beside your pack. A shard of black volcanic glass, a small crystal, and a perfectly preserved ice crystal that never melts. As you ride south toward Riften, you find yourself humming a melody you don't remember learning, a hauntingly beautiful tune. The dragonbone amulet around your neck feels warmer than usual. You wonder once again about the strange power it seems to have for drawing stories to you, and their tellers as well. The road to solitude has proven more treacherous than your map suggested. What began as a pleasant autumn journey has become a race against an approaching storm that carries winter's fury in its dark clouds. storm strikes without warning as you crest a ridge overlooking a sheltered vale. One moment, you're riding under overcast skies. The next, you're engulfed in a whiteout so complete you can barely see your horse's ears. The wind howls like wolves, driving snow horizontally and making progress dangerous. Through the swirling chaos, a warm glow beckons from the candle hearth hole, a roadside inn nestled against the pine trees. You guide your exhausted horse toward the stable, where a bundled figure emerges to take her reins with practiced efficiency. You enter. Inside, the inn radiates warmth and the comforting sounds of conversation and clinking tankards. The common room is crowded with fellow travelers, all caught by the same unexpected storm. The innkeeper, a robust Nord woman with graying braids, takes one look at your ice-crusted cloak and gestures toward the massive stone hearth. Last room upstairs, she tells you, after you've thawed sufficiently. Storm like this, we pack them tight. But everyone needs shelter. Hot meal and strong drink are extra. But I'm guessing you won't mind. You settle near the fire, grateful for the warmth. The ancient bone amulet you've worn since childhood has worked its way outside your tunic during the ride. Its carved surface catching the firelight and casting strange shadows. It's then that you notice the attention of two individuals seated nearby. There's something in their gazes, a recognition, perhaps, or the shared understanding of those who carry stories within them. The first to approach is a weather-beaten Nord hunter, his face marked by old scars and eyes that have seen too much of the world's harshness. His beard is streaked with premature gray, and he moves with the careful deliberation of someone whose joints have endured countless winters in the wilderness. Bjorn Icewalker, he introduces himself simply, settling onto the bench across from you with a grunt of relief. His gaze fixes on your amulet with keen interest. That's old work you're wearing. The kind that draws tales to it like iron draws lightning. I've been carrying on myself. Nearly 40 winters now. He produces a small carved stone from beneath his own furs. Its surface, worn smooth by decades of handling. This reminds me of a story from the old days, when pride ran hotter than forge fire, and men thought themselves the equals of gods. Would you like to hear it? You nod your acceptance, and the hunter's voice takes on the rhythm of one who has told this tale countless times around countless fires. And the tale went like this. In the volcanic reaches of Eastmark, where the mountains themselves bleed fire through cracks in the ancient stone, there once lived a warrior whose fame spread like wildfire through every hold in Skyrim. Valar Flameheart was his name, though he was born with a humbler title that none now remember. He was a man blessed by the gods with strength, cunning, and a charisma that could rally men to follow him into the very jaws of death. This was in the days when Windhelm stood as the greatest city in the east, its ancient walls echoing with the sounds of prosperity and power. Jarl Ormond ruled from the palace of the kings. Proud man, but one easily swayed by whispered words and honeyed lies. His wife, Lady Freylas, was known throughout the court for her beauty and her sharp wit, though few suspected the darkness that lurked beneath her fair exterior. Valar served as the Jarl's champion, leading raids against bandits, hunting down dangerous beasts, and representing Windhelm's interests in matters that required both diplomacy and the implicit threat of violence. He was everything a Nord warrior should be: honorable, brave, and utterly devoted to protecting his people. But like many great men, he possessed a flaw that would prove his undoing. He was utterly immune to temptation. When Lady Freylas set her sights on the handsome champion, expecting him to fall at her feet like so many others, Valar's honor proved stronger than her charms. He rebuffed her advances with the kind of polite but firm rejection that leaves no room for hope or negotiation. Now, for a woman accustomed to getting whatever she desired, this rejection was more than humiliating. It was unforgivable. Hell has no fury like a woman scorned. And Lady Freylis proved the truth of those words. She went to her husband with tears in her eyes, poison on her tongue, spinning a tale of how Valar had not only forced his attentions upon her, but had spoken treasonously of overthrowing the Jarl and claiming both throne and wife for himself. Now, Jarl Ormond was many things, but he was not stupid. He knew his wife's nature, and he suspected the truth of the matter. But he also knew that to openly contradict her would create a scandal that could tear his court apart. So, he devised a solution that would honor the ancient laws of hospitality while removing the source of conflict from his hall. He summoned Valar and presented him with what appeared to be a great honor: a diplomatic mission to the distant hold of Riften, carrying messages to Jarl Brynjar regarding trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. The warrior accepted gladly, seeing it as an opportunity to serve his lord and expand Windhelm's influence. What Valar didn't know was that the sealed message he carried contained not diplomatic correspondence, but his own death warrant. You see, the letter instructed Jarl Brynjar to execute the bearer immediately upon arrival, with some fabricated story about treason and conspiracy to cover the deed. But when Valar arrived in Riften and presented the message, Jarl Brynjar found himself in the same position as his counterpart in Windhelm. See, the laws of hospitality were sacred among the Nords. To kill a guest under one's roof was a violation that would bring the curse of the gods down upon the offender. Yet, to ignore the direct request of a fellow Jarl would create political complications that could lead to war. So, Brynjar chose a third path. He offered Valar what appeared to be a chance at redemption. Quest so dangerous that it would likely result in the warrior's death, but one that would also bring great glory if somehow accomplished. He was to seek out and slay the flame-bound terror, a legendary beast that dwelt in the molten heart of the mountains beyond Riften. Now, the flame-bound terror was no ordinary dragon or giant. It was something older, more primal. A creature born from the union of ancient Daedric magic and the raw, elemental fury of the earth itself. The beast resembled a dragon in some ways, but its hide was formed from living lava that cooled and cracked and flowed anew with each breath. Its wings were sheets of superheated air that could melt steel at a distance, and its roar was the sound of mountains being born. For generations, the creature had dwelt in the deepest caverns beneath the Eldercleam, feeding on the geothermal energy that flowed through the mountain's roots. Occasionally, it would emerge to hunt, leaving behind trails of glass where its feet had touched stone, and forests reduced to ash by its passing. No warrior who had sought to claim its head had ever returned. Valor accepted the quest without hesitation. Though he was no fool, he knew the odds of survival were virtually non-existent. But his honor demanded that he attempt the impossible rather than flee in shame. Besides, he had heard whispers of old magics that might aid him in his quest, if he was brave enough to seek them out, that is. His search led him to a hidden shrine dedicated to Kyle, the Nord goddess of the storm and sky. There, an ancient priestess, some say she was an avatar of the goddess herself, recognized the nobility of his purpose despite the web of lies that had entangled him. She granted him a boon that would level the playing field: the summoning and binding of Stormhoof, a mythical stag that could run upon the wind itself. Stormhoof, it was said, was a creature of pure, ethereal energy, its form shifting like the northern lights, its hoofs striking sparks from empty air as it galloped through dimensions that mortal eyes could barely perceive. Riding such a mount, Valar could reach the flame-bound terror's lair and, more importantly, maneuver in 3 dimensions during the inevitable battle. The confrontation that followed became stuff of legend. High above rivers of molten rock, warrior and monster clashed in aerial combat that shook the very foundations of the mountain. Valar's blade, pressed by Kain's priestess, could wound the creature, but could not deliver a killing blow. The beast's body simply reformed wherever it was cut. Liquid rock, flowing like blood, to heal any damage. But Valar had not survived this long by relying solely on strength. Observing the creature's anatomy during the battle, he noticed that its heart, a core of white-hot energy, visible through cracks in its chest, pulsed with a rhythm that matched the mountain's own geological heartbeat. If he could disrupt that rhythm, perhaps he could destabilize the entire creature. Using Stormhoof's supernatural speed and agility, Valar led the flame-bound terror into a chase through the cavern system, baiting it into pursuing him through dark chambers where ancient ice still clung to the walls despite the intense heat. And at precisely the right moment, he shattered these ice formations with his blade, sending massive shards cascading into the creature's open maw. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. A sudden temperature differential created fractures throughout the beast's molten body, and the ice acted like a poison in its veins, solidifying the liquid rock that served as its blood. With a roar that brought down half the mountain, the flame-bound terror collapsed, its body cooling into a sculpture of black obsidian that would stand in those caverns for all eternity. Valar returned to Riften, bearing proof of his impossible victory. Scales of cooled lava that still pulsed within her fire, trophy enough to satisfy even the most skeptical observer. Jarl Brynjar, both impressed and somewhat cringed that his death sentence had been transformed into a heroic triumph, had no choice but to honor the warrior with feasts and celebrations. Word of the deed spread quickly throughout Skyrim, and soon Valar found himself the most famous hero in the land. Songs were sung of his victory. Bards completed to craft ever more elaborate versions of the tale. Young warriors sought him out for training, and jarls vied for the honor of hosting him in their halls. But success, as it so often does, bred arrogance. Valar began to believe his own legend, to think that his victory over the flame-bound terror proved he was destined for greater things than mere morality could offer. He looked upon the lesser achievements of other men with disdain, and spoke openly of his worthiness to join the heroes of Sovngarde while still breathing. The final straw came when he announced his intention to ride Stormhoof beyond the mortal realm, to ascend Kaine's domain while still alive, and claim a place among the gods themselves. The very hubris that Lady Freylis had falsely accused him of had become real, nurtured by adulation and unchecked pride. On the night he chose for his ascension, Valar mounted Stormhoof and urged the ethereal stag skyward. Rising above the clouds and into the realm where the aurora danced among the stars. And for a brief, glorious moment, it seemed his audacious plan might succeed. He could see the distant gates of Sovngarde, could hear the voices of ancient heroes calling to him across the void. Kaine herself intervened, her divine wrath kindled by this mortal's presumption. She sent forth a wind of absolute cold, a gale that carried within it the essence of every winter that had ever been or ever would be. The wind struck Stormhoof like a physical blow, blinding the ethereal stag and sending it tumbling from the great sky like a falling star. Valar crashed back to earth in the forests outside Riften. His body broken, but his life spared, though some might argue that mercy was was the cruelest punishment of all. He survived the fall, but his pride did not. The man who had slain the flame-bound terror was reduced to a wandering beggar. His glory days behind him, his legend slowly fading into myth as newer heroes rose to take his place. He lived for many years after his fall, but they were years of bitter reflection and growing wisdom. He came to understand that true heroism lay not in great deeds done for personal glory, but in small acts of kindness performed without thought of reward. And when death finally claimed him, it was a humble man who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that even the mightiest heroes are still only mortal, and that the gods do not suffer pride lightly. The tale serves as a reminder to all who would seek glory that courage and skill can take a man far, but without wisdom and humility to guide them, they become the instruments of downfall. And in the end, we are all subject to powers greater than ourselves. The wise hero knows when to bow his head. As Bjorn concludes his sobering tale, another voice cuts through the tavern's ambient noise. An elderly Nord woman approaches, her weathered face bearing the marks of someone who has lived through more winters than most. She wears the traditional garb of the coastal clans, and her eyes hold the steady gaze of one who has watched many storms from shore. Secret Wave Walker, she introduces herself, settling beside the fire with careful movements of advanced age. That was well told, Hunter, though it speaks truth that many would prefer to forget. Your amulet there. She gestures to the bone carving around your neck. It reminds me of another tale from the old days. One that speaks different to virtues and pride and its consequences. If you would hear it, I carry a story of sacrifice and love that transcends even death itself. your encouraging nod, the old woman's voice takes on the cadence of ancient oral tradition, her words carrying the weight of generations who have preserved this tale. And it went like this. In the harsh coastal regions near Dawnstar, where the Sea of Ghosts meets the frozen shores of Skyrim, and the northern lights dance every clear evening across the star-filled skies, there once lived a chieftain whose wisdom was matched only by his love for his family. Ulrich Iceborn was his name, earned not through any great battle, but through the simple fact that he had been born during the worst blizzard in living memory, when the very air seemed to freeze solid, and the strongest warriors dared not venture outside their halls. Now, Ulrich ruled the clan of the Pale Wolves, a hardy folk who made their living from the sea and the land in equal measure. They were fishers and hunters, traders and warriors bound together by blood and oath in the ancient ways. Though Ulrich was respected as a leader and feared as a fighter, his greatest pride was not in his achievements, but in his son, Fenric the Bold, a young warrior who embodied all virtues the Nords held dear. Fenric was everything a father could hope for in an heir. Strong enough to wrestle a bear, brave enough to face down a dragon, yet wise enough to know when words served better than weapons. He commanded a band of warriors who would follow him into the very depths of oblivion. And he used that loyalty not for conquest, but for protection, guarding the coastal settlements from raiders and beasts, ensuring safe passage for traders, and maintaining the ancient patrol routes that kept their stretch of coastline secure. But Fenric and his warriors labored under a terrible curse. A curse that had been placed upon the clan generations before by a vengeful necromancer. A necromancer whose dark experiments had been disrupted by their ancestors. The curse was called the Whispering Cold, a magical affliction that would strike the warriors at random intervals, sending them into a supernatural slumber from which they could not be wakened by any normal means. The curse was crafted with particular cruelty, for it would always manifest at moments when the warriors were needed most. When bandits threatened the settlements, when sea raiders appeared on the horizon, when wild beasts descended from the mountains. That was when the whispering cold would claim its victims, leaving the people defenseless, just when they needed protection most desperately. Learned men had studied the curse for generations, seeking a way to break or counter it. But the necromancer's work had been thorough and malicious. The only thing that could pierce the supernatural sleep was a shock of profound emotional magnitude, usually grief or terror, so intense that it could penetrate even the deepest magical slumber. This curse had been dormant for several years when the crisis struck. A fleet of Admiran raiders, refugees from the civil wars that periodically tore apart the northern continent, appeared on the horizon in longships blackened by fire and war. These were not ordinary pirates seeking easy plunder, but desperate men driven from their homeland, willing to take what they needed by force and burn everything else to ensure no pursuit. Jarl Asvald of Dawnstar, a man more concerned with political maneuvering than military necessity, surveyed the approaching threat and made a decision that would haunt the region for generations. He had long been suspicious of Ulrich's clan, fearing their growing influence and the respect they commanded among the common folk. Rather than call upon their aid, as tradition demanded, he chose to face the raiders with only his own household guard, a force adequate for maintaining order in peacetime, but woefully insufficient for repelling a determined invasion. So, when Ulrich learned of the Jarl's decision, he was faced with a choice that would define his legacy. He could respect the Jarl's wishes and keep his warriors in reserve, avoiding political complications but potentially allowing disaster to befall the innocent. Or he could take matters into his own hands, riding out alone to wake his cursed son and break the spell that held the pale wolves in supernatural slumber. There was, of course, no real choice at all. Ulrich Iceborn had not lived 60 winters and earned the respect of his people by placing politics above protection. He mounted his warhorse and rode out into the bitter darkness, following the coastal path toward the hidden valley where Fenric and his warriors lay trapped in their cursed sleep. The journey was treacherous, even under the best conditions. A winding trail that hugged cliffs, where a single misstep could send horse and rider plummeting into the icy waters below. But this night was far from the best of conditions. A fierce winter storm had blown in from the north, bringing with it snow and ice that made the already dangerous path nearly impossible. Ulrich pressed on regardless, driven by the knowledge that every moment's delay brought the raiders closer to shore. He could see their torches in the distance. He could hear the war songs they sang to keep their courage up as they approached the landing breaches. Time was running out, and only Fenric's warriors stood any chance of mounting an effective defense. Halfway through his desperate journey, tragedy struck. The storm had coated the cliff path with a layer of thin ice, so thin it was nearly invisible, yet thick enough to provide no purchase for the horse's hooves. At a particularly treacherous turn, when the path narrowed to barely the width of a man's shoulder, his mount lost its footing. The warhorse stumbled, fought desperately to regain its balance, then went down with a scream. Ulrich was thrown forward with tremendous force, his momentum carrying him past his falling mount toward the edge of the cliff. In a final, desperate attempt to save himself, he threw out his hand to catch hold of anything that might arrest his fall. What he caught was his own battle axe, its blade buried in the crevice of stone where it had lodged during his tumble. The angle was wrong, the speed too great, and the warrior's momentum too powerful to be safely arrested. The axe blade, honed to razor sharpness by decades of careful maintenance, sliced cleanly through flesh and bone, severing Ulrich's head from his body in a single horrible instant. And by all rights, that should have been the end of this tale. A brave man's tragic death, a son who would never wake to learn of his father's sacrifice, and a coastline left defenseless against raiders who showed no mercy to the weak. But the ancient spirits of Skyrim, the guardians who watch over those who die in the service of others, intervened in a way that defied both nature and reason. You see, Ulrich's severed head, somehow still conscious and aware, rose from the bloody snow where it had fallen. His eyes still blazed with determination. His mouth still moved with words of warning and command. Clasped in his lifeless hand, for his body had not followed his head over the cliff, the grisly trophy began its journey toward the valley where his son lay trapped in supernatural slumber. What followed was perhaps the most horrific and heroic sight ever witnessed in the northern reaches of Skyrim. Ulrich's disembodied head, carried in his own dead hand, made its way along the treacherous cliff path, crying out warnings and commands in a voice that echoed with otherworldly power. The very stones seemed to respond to his determination, providing purchase where none should exist, while the storm itself bent aside to allow his passage. The warriors, trapped in the whispering cold's embrace, heard his voice long before they saw his approach. At first, they dismissed the distant cries as illusions spawned by their cursed dreams. The necromancer's magic often tormented them with false hopes of rescue. But as the voice grew stronger and more distinct, as the words became clear and recognizable, even the deepest magical slumber could not withstand the emotional shock of what they were hearing. When Ulrich's severed head finally reached the valley where his son and the other warriors lay, the sight was enough to shatter the whispering cold like glass. Fenric and his men awoke to find their beloved chieftain's head clasped in his own lifeless hand, still speaking words of love and command, still urging them to action despite the impossibility of his condition. The shock and grief were profound. but they were also galvanizing. The warriors understood immediately what had happened, what sacrifice had been made to free them from their curse. Their rage at this loss, their determination to make it meaningful, burned away the last vestiges of magical slumber and filled them with a fury that would make their enemies tremble. Fenric the Bold took his father's head in his hands, listened to the final words of love and tactical advice that Ulrich managed to speak, then led his warriors in a charge toward the coast. It became the stuff of legend. They reached the beaches just as the Atmoran raiders were making their landing. And the battle that followed was swift and decisive. The raiders, expecting to face only a handful of Jarl Asvald's guards, found themselves confronting a band of warriors driven by grief and supernatural fury. The pale wolves fought like men possessed, and perhaps they were, for some claimed to see the ghostly figure of Ulrich Iceborn leading their charge, his severed head restored to his shoulders, his battle axe gleaming with spectral fire. The raiders were driven back into the sea with heavy losses. Their surviving ships limping away into the northern darkness. Not one raider set foot on Skyrim soil beyond the waterline. And the settlements they had planned to sack remained safe and whole. After the battle, Fenric and his warriors built a great cairn on the cliff top, overlooking the sea, placing Ulrich's head at its peak, where his eyes could forever watch the northern approaches. They buried his body separately in the valley where his sacrifice had freed them from their curse. But it is said that on the darkest of nights, when danger threatens the coast, the two parts of Ulrich Iceborn reunite to stand guard once more. This tale became legendary among the coastal clans, testament to the bonds of kinship and duty that transcend even death. Parents tell it to their children to teach them about sacrifice and love, while warriors invoke Ulrich's name when they face impossible odds. It serves as a reminder that true heroism is not found in great deeds done for personal glory, but in the willingness to give everything, even life itself, for the protection of those we love. In the years that followed, whispering cold never again afflicted the pale wolves. Some say that Ulrich's sacrifice broke the curse permanently, while others believe that his spirit stands guard against all who would harm his people. Either way, the clan prospered and grew strong, becoming one of the most respected families in all the northern halls. And on winter nights, when the wind howls across the frozen cliffs and the aurora dances overhead, fishermen and traders still report hearing a voice calling warnings from the darkness. The voice of Ulrich Iceborn, still watching, still protecting, still proving that the bounds of love and duty are stronger than death itself. As Sigrid concludes her haunting tale, the storm outside has begun to subside. The howling wind has diminished to a whisper, and through the windows you can see dawn breaking through the clouds. You retire to your room for a few hours of rest. When you wake and prepare to continue your journey, you seek out your companions to offer thanks. But the innkeeper looks puzzled. Bjorn Icewalker, Sigrid Wavewalker. Can't say I recall those names. Had plenty of folks sheltering, but I'd remember such distinctive individuals. You might have dismissed it as a dream, were it not for the two items beside your pack. A shard of volcanic glass that pulses with heat, and carved driftwood marked with ruins of eternal vigilance. And soon, you're back riding toward solitude. The dragonbone amulet feels warmer than usual, and you wonder again about its strange power for drawing stories to you and their tellers as well.